Hello, this video will review Unit 4 material in preparation for the Unit 4 quiz or exam. First, I would encourage you to check out the brain dump that I created that's listed in a Word document this time because the Google Docs wasn't working. If you see there, I listed it as almost like a study guide to give you the opportunity to go through and look at the statutes that we covered in this unit and to highlight those important sections of the statute. When we look at employment law statutes, some of the most important pieces are really identifying, one, who does this statute apply to, and what type of employer does it apply to, and what is the area of law that's relevant to. So for FLSA, that would be, labor related issues such as wages and hours worked and that type of thing. FMLA is the Family Medical Leave Act, so it will pertain to time that people need to take off to care for, a serious medical condition. So those words should be triggered to guide you to FMLA. As we start to get into some of the employment discrimination laws, that's where it really starts to become very specific. A lot of students usually mess up thinking about employment discrimination as all one law, and it's really broken up into chunks. So remember, we have Title VII that covers a lot of different areas and is kind of like the template that is used in other laws, such as the ADA, which protects against discrimination on the basis of disability, and the ADEA, which protects against discrimination on the basis of age. So remember, Title VII is not the same as ADA, ADEA. They are kind of additional statutes that are similar to Title VII. So make sure you understand what are the protected classes of Title VII and what are the protected classes of the other statutes that we cover. And then remember, it's kind of like a ping pong match. So one, the employee who feels like they've been discriminated against files a charge of discrimination. Then they basically write out, here is my prima facie case. Here's what I think happened and why I think that they discriminated against me. Boom. Then that ball goes over to the employer to say, no, that's not what happened. Here's what happened. The employee was, engaging in inappropriate behavior, or the employee wasn't meeting standards like every other employee, and here are similarly situated individuals of different protected classes that we've treated the exact same way. And so that then the ball goes back to the employee to say, okay, this is all smoke and mirrors, so to speak, that this is stuff that you're making up because here's what really happened. So it's kind of like that last ditch effort to make a case. And so we're going to do an example here in a moment, and I'll show you how that works. All right, so here's the hypothetical that we're going to walk through. So for 20 years, Ozzy worked for Players Paradise, a destination for vacationers from across the states, maintaining golf carts. After a steady stream of positive job evaluations and merit-based pay raises, Ozzy is promoted to the position of supervisor of golf cart maintenance at 3 of Players' courses. 5 years later, a new employee, Quentin, is hired to oversee operations at all 10 of Players' courses. Quentin demotes Ozzy, who is now over the age of 40, to run only one of three cart facilities and freezes his salary. Quentin demotes 5 other employees over the age of 40 and places one of Ozzy's former facilities under the supervision of Richie, who is 23. Ozzy overhears Richie say, "We're going to have to do away with these old senile men." Less than a year later, Quentin consolidates the 3 cart facility operations under Richie's charge. Ozzy quits and files a suit against Players for employment discrimination should he prevail. And think about how you might explain that. All right, so first, let's go down to the bottom where it says Ozzy quits and files suit for against Player for employment discrimination. Ding, ding, ding. We already know now we need to look at employment discrimination laws, not other areas of employment law that we talked about. So we're not talking about workers' compensation, FLSA, FMLA. We're going straight to the employment discrimination statute. So pay attention to the call of the question. That'll help narrow down things quite a bit. So now we're going to look at employment discrimination laws. So we have Title VII, our ADEA, and our ADA are kind of the 3 big ones that we play with. Now, what do you think is the employment discrimination statute that would apply here? What is the protected class that's talked about in this hypothetical? age. So now, how old is Ozzy? Well, what we know is within 5 years, he's over the age of 40. So best guess is that he's 40 to 45, somewhere in between that 40 and 50 range. Nonetheless, he's over the age of 40. What do we need to have to qualify for the the Age Discrimination Employment Act? You need to have an employee who's over the age of 40. All right, so now that we know who the employee is, let's look at the employer. Now, what we don't have in this fact is how many employees Players Paradise has, but for the purposes of this, you can probably assume it's over 20. I mean, they have 3 different golf courses, so it's likely that they have over 20 employees to meet the requirement there. Boom. Okay, so now let's talk about what happened here. Ozzy has had a steady stream of positive job evaluations and merit-based pay raises. So during the entire course of his career, for 20 years, he's been doing well. Then what happens? 5 years later, after he's promoted to supervisor, they hire a new person, Quentin. And that person is hired at above rank of Ozzy. And what does Quentin do? Quentin demotes Ozzy. So when we're looking at these employment discrimination laws, we have to see what is the adverse employment action that took place. Okay, so once we qualify all those pieces of whether or not the statute applies, now we have to say, okay, what happened? What's the adverse employment action that took place? Well, Quentin demoted Ozzy. And then what did he do? He froze his salary. I didn't even get to highlight that one, but he froze his salary. And then what else did Quentin do? Quentin demotes 5 other employees who are over the age of 40. Okay, so now we're starting to look at the, I guess what you could consider evidence to support the claim that Ozzy was discriminated against. So I want to point you out to a resource that is on As You Learn that hopefully some of you had the opportunity to look at. But if you look on As You Learn under Unit 4, there's something called Resource Employment Discrimination Laws. And this is more of a visual graphic that talks about employment discrimination laws. So we've got to walk through our prima facie case to fully understand what happens to Ozzy here. So our prima facie case, in all of these, I think I just give examples of hiring and misconduct. And so for this situation, we have somebody that was demoted. So what we would do is just kind of take these words and change them. So was Ozzy a member of a protected class? Yes, he's over the age of 40, so he's a member of the protected class of age, which qualifies for the Age Discrimination Employment Act. Was he qualified for the job from which he was not fired, but demoted and had his salary freeze from? Yes, we have nothing in the facts to indicate otherwise. So now that we look at that, now we have to ask, well, was this particular adverse employment action that took place nearly identical to that which was engaged by another employee? What happens to other employees in this same situation? What is going on in the enterprise as we're looking at demotions and salary freezes? Well, the facts will tell you that Quentin demotes 5 other employees over the age of 40 and places one of Ozzy's former facilities under the supervision of Richie, who is 23. So we've got a demotion, we've got a salary freeze, and then we take some of the facilities that were under Ozzy's supervision and put them under the supervision of someone who's younger. All right, that kind of stuff does happen in an organization. And what an employer can turn around and do is say, hey, this was part of a reorganization. It was just mere coincidence that this happened to other folks who were over the age of 40. And I'm going to get here to the defenses here in a moment. But then we have Ozzy, who overhears Richie, who is this 23-year-old that they moved some of this stuff away to, saying, so then the question is, who is we going to have to do away with these old senile men? Less than a year after that statement, Quentin reconsolidates the 3 cart facility operations under Richie's charge. So now we've got a complete movement to Richie. Ozzie quits and then files a suit against players for employment discrimination. All right, member of a protected class. Adverse employment action. Did that adverse employment action happen to others outside of Ozzie's protected class? That might be a defense that Players Paradise would want to present. Yes, this happened to 5 other employees over the age of 40. This also happened to 6 other employees under the age of 40. Another defense would be, well, Quentin is 38 and Ozzie is 42. There's not a really big age difference between Quentin and Ozzie. So that could be another issue that could be raised by the defense. What's the other kind of highlightable point at the very last sentence? Ozzie quits. Now, if you remember our prima facie case, the adverse employment actions that a lot of them talk about, the individual was fired or terminated, and that's, employment discrimination was based on the fact that they were fired. If somebody quits, was that really employment discrimination? What term did I talk about in the lectures that kind of helps with that particular element? Constructive discharge. Now remember, the definition of constructive discharge is where an employee quits or resigns as a result of the employer creating a hostile working environment. They made the working conditions so intolerable that any reasonable person would feel compelled to quit. Now, if we look here, if you freeze my salary and you've started calling me an old senile man and you've moved all the facilities around and you've basically taken me from a supervisor down to nothing again, have you made the working conditions so intolerable that I feel compelled to quit? And it's probably likely that constructive discharge would apply here. So as you can see here, I went through labeling our parties, who was Ozzie, who was Quentin, who was Players Paradise. Then I went through the prima facie case, what employment discrimination statute applies, and then I walked through the elements, each one of them, looking at, okay, what was the adverse employment action? Does this type of thing happen to other employees outside of Ozzie's protected class? And then I walked down some of the defenses. And that's all I have for the employment law review for Unit 4. So if you have any questions as you're taking a look at your notes, as you're filling out that study guide, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be around. Take care. Have a great day.